Okay, I'm about to teach you how to turn these into these. Let's get started. Okay, so you may be looking at these and being like, what in the world are these? So these are, I guess, like an upbuild project. These are milk jugs, body wash containers, all sorts of things like that, that were melted down, made into molds, and then made into a mallet. And if you're wondering if these things are solid, yes, they are very solid. Okay, you are not here for a science lesson, but you have to get one quick concept to make this project work. All plastics fall into one of two categories. They're either a thermoset or a thermoplastic. A thermoset is a plastic that if you try to melt it down, it's just gonna burn. It can't be melted and reshaped. Very hard to recycle, not something you wanna work with. A thermoplastic is something that can be melted and reshaped. Think about a thermoset like an egg. You break it in the pan, you cook it, it gets its shape, you can't melt it and change it. Think about thermoplastic like butter. You melt it down, liquefies, you put it into a mold, you can shape it, or like ice. All right, so what we need to work with here are thermoplastics, which means, all right, well, I'd love to say you can take a milk jug and turn it into one of those mallets. It takes a lot more than just a milk jug. It takes quite a bit of plastic. So right here, I have this garbage bag that I have been saving up, and everything in there is type 2 plastic. Now, you kind of need to think about, what do you want this thing to look like? Here's a block I made that I'm going to turn into a mallet at some point. And you can see it almost looks marbly. All right, versus this one. All right, very different color scheme. And the difference is, what plastic did I use? That's all it comes down to. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna get started with this bag, and we're gonna start cutting it up into small strips, because the smaller you cut it up. So one of my favorite things to use for this project is these big kitty litter containers. Reason being, first off, they're big, but it's also pretty thick plastic, all right? So you get quite a bit out of it. Now, when you cut it open, make sure you get all the litter out of there. So there's different ways to cut these up. Tin snips work really well. Use those and cut into it. Let's see. Box cutter also will work nicely. I always tell my students, be very careful using these. Come back here, you can see I can just get in there and slice right into that. So I have a nice sharp blade on there. This is probably the easiest way to go. I found that if I use tin snips for a while, I tend to get a really bad blister on my thumb. So I'm gonna take a little time here, and I'm just gonna cut up a bunch of this. I'll fast forward this part for you. All right, so I've got a little bit cut up here, and I just grabbed, I think I went to Goodwill and grabbed this, just like a baking tin, nothing big. I'm going to put all this plastic right here into here. You know what? Let me throw the top in. Why not? Now, let's go start melting. All right, so I am outside now. Reason being, you do not want to melt this stuff in your house. Melting plastic is going to smell horrible. It is not good for you. I have it outside. I'm out here very little, basically just to check on it. So I have it in here. What I did is I actually grabbed a very cheap toaster oven, and it's just used for these projects when we do them. And I'm just gonna set that in there and close it up. And what I do is I have it set all the way up to 450 degrees. The stay on doesn't work on this one. So stinks, but I just come out and I set that timer to 60 minutes at a time, and I'm gonna let it melt. So I'm gonna come back in about 10 minutes or so, and we'll check on that. We'll see what it looks like. And at that point, we'll probably need to add a little bit more plastic, and we're just gonna keep doing that. All right, so that first batch is in there, so I figured let's take a few minutes and make our mold. So this is probably the one the kids like the most. This was the first time I ever actually did this project, but I wanna make one that's a little bigger than this. So what I'm gonna do here is make a mold slightly larger than this. So this mallet is 6 inches by 3 inches, and it's 3 inches tall. So basically 6 by 3, 3 inches tall. Now when I think I originally made that, I use 2x4s for a frame. 2x4s are not 2x4. I have a whole video on that. I'll put it, I don't know, up there somewhere. So I'm just going to make this mold that height. And you can see here, a little better look, how that's taller than that. That's okay because when this is done, after we melt it, it's gonna be kind of sloppy. We're gonna have to trim it. So I'm just gonna use 2x4, like I said. This is 6x3. I wanna make it a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna make the inside dimensions, I don't know, maybe 6.5 by 3.25. Let's go make a mold. All right, I'm only gonna use 1 screw per board here, or per side. And I'm using 2.5-inch screws. All right, now flip it over to the other side. We have a box. Now, we need a bottom. The bottom can be any piece of scrap wood. I have this lying around. I don't even know what it was used for. It's got like sticky stuff on it. All I'm gonna do is make sure it's big enough to cover the bottom. I don't even care if it's a little too big. I'm just doing something like that. There we go. And beautiful. Now, while we're at it, we also need a top. And guess what? That scrap piece of work. Now, why do we need a top if we're just gonna be shoving plastic into here? Reason being is after we screw this in, and that plastic is all good and melted, we're gonna put all that gooey plastic in here, and we want to compress this down. We're gonna put more plastic than is actually needed, because it has to squeeze in, fill all the cracks, and then we're gonna clamp this, and it's just gonna cause that plastic to ooze out of there. So, it's a little bit fun. All right, let's do our first check up here. It's been about 12 minutes or so. You can see, that looks a little different. It's starting to melt down. So what I'm gonna do is put some more plastic in. So I've basically been cutting up plastic, filling up this thing. And throw this back in. All right, so I've grabbed some short screws. I've got 1/2-inch OSB here, so I grabbed some 1 1/4-inch screws. And all I'm going to do is attach this bottom. Well, apparently that thing was causing some shaking on the table. Thankfully, we're still intact. Whatever you decide to use for a handle, we're gonna get that set up. Now, honestly, you're not gonna need that handle until tomorrow, and you'll understand what I mean about that shortly when we finish up melting that plastic. But let's go make a handle. All right, so I had a student give me this about a year ago. He brought in, it's called Osage Orange. I've never used it before, but he said make something cool out of it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to. We're gonna use this for the handle. Now, something to think about when you're making your handle, people tend to make them smaller than what they anticipate it coming out as. What I mean by that is they'll look at like from here to here and think that's how big I want my handle, forgetting about the handle going through the head. All right, so you have to factor that in. So if I looked at this, if I put these even here, my handle's gonna be at least this long. I'm gonna make this one longer. I'm probably gonna come out here. I'm gonna lose a little bit because of what I have to cut off on the lathe. And I actually want this handle a little bit bigger. If I'm gonna make this one, let's make a big one, all right? All right, quick timeout. Let's go check on the plastic. All right. As you can see, we filled this thing twice so far, and it looks like there's barely anything in there. Because that's what happens. It just keeps melting down. Fill it again. Right here, I have like an old piece of one that was cut off. We'll put that in there. But again, this is thermoplastic. It can be melted and reshaped over and over again. All right, so I have added a bit of plastic in here. I added some old stuff that I'd made. But again, the beauty is that it can be remelted. If you look right now, it's getting pretty goopy. So this is just about there, and I think this is enough plastic. So I'm gonna give this a little bit longer. I'm gonna put this into the mold. All right, let's get the oven mitt on. I think we are probably good to go here. Oh yeah, we're smoking a little bit. So let's see how gooey we are. I would say we're good here. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take that and put it into my mold. So I'm gonna do here, I have my mold, I have my plastic, and I'm just going to basically plop this all into there. There it goes. See here, I'm just gonna kind of shove this all down in there. Now I want to get as much of that in the middle as I can here. You gotta see what I'm looking at there. Ew. All right. And I'm trying to make it so not a lot of it's overhanging. So I want to make sure when I compress this, it really gets in there. So this looks pretty good. All right, now my top. Just going to go on here like this, and then I'm going to clamp this thing. So take a clamp, clamp this like this, put that right over that. I'm going to start tightening. Take another clamp from the other side. Do the same thing. As I start tightening there, I'll tighten this one, make sure it's where I want it. Now that plastic is very hot, obviously. I'm just gonna put a bunch of clamps around here. So if you look here, you'll see there's some plastic kind of oozing out there. What I'm gonna do real quick while it's still hot, I'm gonna pop this off. I'm gonna get a quick look. Got a little wood shaving out of there. OSB isn't always the best idea, but it's what I had. And you see how it looks like it's pretty solid in there. But just to be safe, one more time, I'm gonna kind of shove this towards the middle. All that stuff that's over the edge, I'm kind of folding that in. And then I'm gonna reclamp it. So I wanna make sure this thing is as solid as I can make it. Four clamps, solid. We've still got a little bit oozing out. All right, like I said, that oozing is okay because that means it's so packed, it's coming out. The big thing is making sure you have enough plastic in there where this thing is going to be solid. So now that is going to sit overnight. We'll come back to it tomorrow. All right, it sat overnight. Moment of truth. Let's see what happens. And we have a blob of a mess. So what I'm gonna do now, let's pop out these screws. We need to pry this thing. So, I could sit here and pry this, or I could remember that I put screws in the bottom, and that's why it's not moving. Let's do that. Now, we have this beauty right here. So, we gotta clean this up. All right, so we look at this right now and you can see, I mean, it's okay, but it's definitely not what I'm looking for. So I just got off all that big excess stuff. Now I need to really square this thing up. You can see here, you start to see the different colors from all where the different plastics were. Now this side, as you can see, that dents in really bad. So we're gonna take a good amount off of there. Well, this sucks. Part of it did not work like I wanted. So overall, this thing looks pretty awesome. But you'll notice that line there, like that, I love. The bandsaw started to kind of wander here. All right, so now I could cut that all off, but then this would be smaller than I want it to be. So here's the beauty of working with a thermoplastic. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hit this with the heat gun, I'm gonna clamp it, and just let it go together. So, go right here. Again, here's that cracked area. I'd show it this way so you can see it okay. What I'm going to do is, with the heat gun, all right, so you can see here, it's starting to seal up nicely, except that one spot where it's really deep. So I'm gonna grab something to kind of smear that and fill it in. So what I did is I just grabbed some of the, I'd say sawdust, plastic dust, and little shavings. And I'm gonna kind of fill that in there. All right, so we're getting there. Filled in the cracks I want it filled in. This thing, I think, looks pretty cool. But I don't want to leave these 90s on here, so I'm gonna take it to the router. Okay, so as you can see now, that looks a little fancier. A couple of spots to clean off, but that is beautiful. Now, let's make this into a mallet. Okay, so I have my handle, I have the mallet head. I need to put a hole in here to drill this through. What I'm gonna do for that is I just have a kit of fastener bits here. Now I'm just gonna find the size that is the closest fit. Probably this one right here. And that it is. All right, take a look here. Just gonna set that there. That is pretty darn good right there. If you have to decide making the hole a little too big or a little too small, make the hole a little smaller, because you can always sand the edge of this a little bit. This looks like it's gonna be pretty darn good though. All right, so if you see, that's as far as I can get that bit to go there. It did not go all the way through. So I have two choices. I could probably adjust that just a hair and make it go that last little bit, because it's really close. Or I can see where the center is. I can just drill in from the other side. Now, here's a little tip in a situation like this. If you can't see where the center is, like I can see because it's so close, it was starting to poke through. But if I couldn't, here's what I would do, because this has happened before. I will take a long, thin drill bit, because you can see where the center is from the Forstner bit, because there's a little spike on the center. I would take a long, thin bit, drill all the way through so it pops out the other side through that center. Then you know where the middle is. Flip it over, drill in through the other side. All right, so this is all the way through. Let's hope this fits. All right, very tight, which is a good thing, but it will go through. All right, now, the question is, how do I get this to stay in here? And do I really need it this long? Is this excessive for a mallet? I mean, definitely got some power here, but I might shave a little bit off the end here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to cut this to put a wedge in there. That will help hold it in. Okay, so that is cut for the wedge to go in. Now, before I go cutting the little wedge piece and setting the head on, I want to drill a hole through here because, you know, what's a good mallet without a nice little leather strap on the end of it? All right, so when I do this, I want the hole to go through the same direction as the slit is here. So I'm going to have the hole go through here and down. Now, drilling into a cylindrical piece can be a little challenging. A lot of people will make a V block and then they'll set it in there. I have what I think is an easier way, so let's do it. All right, so I want to be drilling the hole through this side here. I don't want that overhang, so I'll do it this way. I'm going to make sure it's lined up the way I want it, which would be with that end up. And I'm going to put a clamp on here. Just make sure I'm straight. There we go. Now, because that's clamped in, when I drill through here, it's not going to go anywhere. All right, so I can go right through and not have to worry about it rotating or anything like that. And there we go, all the way through. All right, so now I need to cut my actual wedge. So I found this scrap lying around, and I was like, you know what? I think that color will look nice against there, especially with that little dark spot right there. So I'm going to cut a piece of this that is wide enough to fit across the handle. So you see how that is wide enough to fit there. So now I have to cut this into an actual wedge shape. All right, so the thing about this, that is going to go into here. And when I drive that in, it's going to spread this apart to make it lock in the head. All right, so I've got the head here. This is going to fit in. You can see we've got some wiggle room there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to drive this into here. To do that, I need a mallet, which brings the question, how do you make a mallet if you don't have a mallet? And you know what? I don't have a good answer for you. Thankfully, I have one. Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of holding this, the head to this one. I'm gonna bring this down a little. I'm holding it up where I want it, because I can let that slide down. So I'm gonna hold it right up there, and I'm kind of locking it in place. And you could use a clamp here and then hold it lower if you don't want to maybe pinch your finger. I don't know. What I'm gonna do is driving this in. See, that is pretty solid now. Better safe than sorry. All right, and that's to the point where, as you can see, I'm actually starting to crack that top a little bit. So I would say we are good. And you can see this thing is not going anywhere. So now I'm gonna go back to the bandsaw and trim off this little bit of excess. So, as you can see, boom. Now, if you want to, grab a piece of leather, throw on a little strap. So for this one, I don't have any real leather left, so I'm gonna use this fake leather stuff. I literally get this stuff by like the spool. I'll throw a link to it below. I found it on Amazon. It's not quite as strong as the regular leather, but if it's for decorative purposes or just to hang the thing up, it works great. And all I'm gonna do is I'm going to slide it through the hole. right. Get a little better angle here so you can see. And to tie this, it's super easy. I'm just going to put the two ends together. All right, I'm going to pinch, just give it a twist, and put that through the hole. Super easy. And now I can hang my mighty mallet here. So there you go. And this one, wow, that's a long handle. But if you don't like that, maybe you like this one. Or maybe you like this one. This is the first one I made. A lot of people tell me this one's awesome because they say it looks like marble. And that kind of gets me to the whole point of this. If you look at this one and this one, they're similar, but they are definitely each unique. Just like this one is very unique compared to this one. And that's one thing I love about this project. Depending on the plastics you use, you're going to create a different look for it. So if you want to go more blue or clear or red or green, it doesn't matter. You have some freedom here. So hopefully you thought this was a pretty cool project. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll be back with some more cool builds.